All right. Thank you so much. Thank you all, Coast to Coast crew, for giving me this opportunity to present tonight. So I have the pleasure of presenting about Queen Vashti. And so this is her story, Queen Vashti. And this is taken from the book of Esther. Our focus scripture is verses 10 through 22, but I want to take some time to just get the whole context. And so, as Christina mentioned, I am an educator, so I am going to be asking for you to participate. And right now, I would like to have a participant to read these first 4 scriptures. And really, I just need readers for the entire chapter. So do we have a volunteer, or do I get to volunteer somebody?
Do it, Kadera.
All right, thank you.
So Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through 4 here. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 120 provinces. That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days.
And then if you want to read the rest, or can I get another volunteer to read what's on the screen now?
I'll read. Sorry, Kadera. What do I need to read?
Verses 5 through 9. That's on the screen.
Yes, ma'am. You got it. Okay.
Thank you.
And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in, how do you say it?
Shushan.
Shushan, the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beads were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black and marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, for so the king had appointed to all of the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also, Vashti the queen made a feast for the woman in the royal house, which belonged to King
Ahasuerus.
Thank
you. Okay. I'll take over on this part. So on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Bistha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal crown, to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshina, Shethar, Admantha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to law? Because she hath not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes, and to all the people that are in the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day until all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it not be altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both great and small. And the same pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. So once again, our focus text is verses 10 through 22. And so I just want to give a snapshot summary of Esther. Starting from our text, Vashti said no, her husband, the king, said go. Esther got the glow and saved her people for sure. But we want to go ahead and in that, right, this is something that I want to call the domino effect. So I'm pretty sure that we're all familiar with this effect, but I want to break it down with a different type of perspective. And so in this time, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about character, choice, and consequence, first beginning with character. So some of the characters in this text are Vashti, and Esther comes a little bit later, but oftentimes people take some time to compare these two women because they are the women who are centered in this story. They're the women who basically move the plot along. And so we have Queen Vashti. Oops, I gave you a little preview on the answer, but if you can answer in the chat or even out loud, what are some ways that Queen Vashti was viewed within the context of her time? Maybe not now, more with feminism on the rise, but in her time period, how might Queen Vashti have been viewed because of her decision to say no?
Disobedient.
Okay, disobedient. I see defiant in the chat. I see usurper. I see difficult.
Not submissive.
Not submissive. All right, those are all great ones. Man, I would love to live action and add those to this list. Rebellious, she's not a ride or die. Okay, absolutely. So disobedient, disrespectful, defiant, dishonorable, proud in the sense that she did what she wanted to do to protect her reputation, so to speak, I guess. And then foolish. And we'll talk a little bit more about why her decision may have led others to think that she was foolish. And so when we look at Esther, what are some adjectives that people from the time may have used to describe her?
She was beautiful.
Beautiful. Carlos said thick. So in thinking about her character, I see Samantha put submissive in the chat. Christina put wise in the chat. Tactful, yes. So those are all great adjectives. So in addition to the ones that have been mentioned in the chat, obedient, courageous, humble, look at that, yes, wise. And so these two women are essentially juxtaposed in the text within the context of that time period. And so we are going to focus on Vashti though. So with all those negative attributes given to her, I want us to consider, was she really a bad wife, or has she just been misunderstood and misrepresented? Essentially, have we been looking at her through the wrong lens? Patriarchy. So in that, Vashti, when we look at her name means best woman. And so this could be within the context of best looking, which I definitely think is true based on the context, but it could also mean best character. In every category, she was the cream of the crop. And if we look at the beginning of Esther chapter 1, for context, we know that her husband, Ahasuerus, is all about having the best. He's been showing off his kingdom for the past 180 days. And in this process, right, during the last week, Vashti is helping him to do this duty. So she's making a feast, or she had a feast. She's hosting a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. And so what is the king doing at this time? We know he's throwing a party. It's been going on for 180 days. And this is the culmination of the party. And so if we go back to the text in verse 10 and 11, he is merry with wine. So he's drunk, he's faded, he's feeling good. And so in this time, right, he commands his eunuchs to go and tell his wife, the queen, to come before his presence. And so in verse 11, we see that here. And so he tells her tells them to tell her specifically to wear the royal crown. So I know here in this text, it says with the crown royal, we're not talking about the stuff in the purple bag. That is just crown royal, the royal crown. So the purpose is because he wants to show off her beauty. And so that takes us to the second C, which is choice. So Vashti made a choice. She's been commanded by the king, her husband, to come before him and all the princes, all of his homies, essentially, right? In an effort to show off her beauty. But we know that she refused. And so because of that, the king became very upset, and to the point that his anger burned within him. Yes, I see that in the chat, Carlos, to flex his trophy. So then that leaves us to question, well, why did she refuse? Why did she say no, even though she knows that her choice could result in death? And so this is something that I wondered about, and I did a little bit of research. And that goes back to the verse where it mentioned that she was to wear the crown, right? And so in some of the research that I did, there were suggestions or theories that that meant to come wearing only the crown. And so think about the context of that. This is Queen Vashti. 1, she's a queen. 2, she's a woman, right? 3, if she's being asked to come into this room with only a crown, she's exposed, right? And so not only will she be in a room full of men, she's in a room full of drunk men, okay? So she would be exposing herself to all of these men, right? And in Ahasuerus's drunken state, he thinks that this is the move. This is another one of his prizes, his possessions that he can show the other people, the other men, and that they can't have. And so who knows what that might result in. I don't think any of them would have been crazy or bold enough to make advances on her, but they definitely would have been, doing some things with their mind. And even if she was fully clothed, right, they are drunk. They might be undressing her with their eyes. And so I think that one of the reasons she said no was to not only uphold her integrity, but also to uphold the king's integrity. He's not in his right mind. And so she, being the best woman, physically, mentally, character-wise, she decides to say no. Maybe she's hoping that he would understand once he becomes sober again. But based on the story, we know that that does not happen. Yes, so as Jonathan put in the chat, protecting the fool from himself. And so before we go to the next part, I just want to have us pause and contemplate for a moment. If you go back to the text in verse 9, Queen Vashti is fulfilling her wifely duty. She's hosting a feast for the women in the royal house. And in the process of doing this, she is summoned, she is interrupted to come fulfill the needs of her husband. And so with that, right, we know it wasn't necessarily for to show off her wit, her intelligence, her any other gift or talent that she may have had that was not connected to her physicality. So a question I would like for you to contemplate is, who's trying to expose you to boost their ego? Who is trying to interrupt your party or steer you away from your purpose to serve their pride? And who was taking opportunities to objectify you? And with that being said, if anything came to mind, you, like Vashti, have a choice to make. And so that takes us back to the domino effect. So in thinking about that, right, I wanted to break the word down. I looked at what the prefix dom means, and it means dominion or rule. I is a being, basically you. And no is refusal or rejection. And so in that, you are the being in between somebody's dominion, and the no is your opportunity to break from that dominion or that rule if it is not the proper type of dominion. And so that takes us to the consequence, because if you say no, there is a consequence that will follow. If you reject the incorrect dominion, there is a consequence that follows. And so what was that consequence for Vashti? There was a consultation of these wise men in terms of what should happen to Vashti, and whatever happened to her, in effect, what happened to the rest of the women in the kingdom, because the men of the kingdom were afraid that Vashti's choice would embolden the other women to stand up for themselves, to assert themselves. And so they're afraid that this is going to have a domino effect. And so in order to stop that, they suggest to him that he comes up with a commandment, enact a new law that Vashti is no longer allowed before the king, and she's going to be replaced. And so again, King Ahasuerus, not quite sober yet, is like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And so his law, his edict is irreversible. So as a result, Vashti is cast out. And as we know with the rest of the book of Esther, this is how Esther comes into the scene, thus causing the domino effect in which she ends up saving her people. Yes, definitely God's plan. And so the point that I want to leave you with is that Vashti's no resulted in freedom for millions. A lot of the time, Esther is given the credit for it. God, of course, but Esther is given the credit for it. But it was actually an action that started with Vashti. Her no resulted in freedom for millions, including herself. So she lost some things in the process. She was essentially kicked out of her home. We really don't know what happened to her. But what she gained and maintained was her respect. So what I want to leave you with is the question, what will your no lead to? And that is all. Thank you.